Hello. This is a project to see if I can teach some of the key concepts of parallel computation to people with little or no programming experience. This lesson is all about some of the common challenges faced and techniques used when trying to do something in parallel. That is, with multiple people or machines working on some task at the same time to make it go faster. For example, newspaper companies hire multiple paper delivery boys for a city, because it would take far too long for one delivery boy to deliver papers to every house in the city. There's clearly a motivation for parallelism, since it can give you drastic speed increases in whatever you're trying to accomplish. But what are the limitations and challenges that come with using parallelism, and how are they solved? That's what today's lesson will answer. One obvious limitation is money. If the grocery store had 200 checkout lanes, everyone could check out instantly. But that wouldn't be practical in terms of space in the grocery store, or the amount of money they would have to pay all the cashiers to man those lanes. A less obvious limitation is the fact that the more people or machines you have, the more communication or coordination between them you need in many cases. If I gave you a list of 1,000 numbers and asked you to add them up, that might take a while. If you had two people helping you, it would probably be about 3 times as fast, as you could give each person a third of the numbers to add, and then it would be very fast to combine your results at the end. You just have to add the 3 numbers together. If I gave you 50 people, it might not quite be 50 times as fast, because it would take a little longer to combine your results at the end. If I gave you 10,000 people, it might actually slow down the speed of adding the numbers, because you'd have to coordinate all those people, and once they added things, combine their results. Even if paper boys worked for free, to revisit the earlier example, newspaper companies still wouldn't hire a separate one for every house, because at that point coordinating who goes where becomes so much work that it takes more time than you'll save. Communication and coordination can often be an inherent upper limit on how much parallelism will be useful for a given task. Another important factor to consider is the balance of the work the different people or machines are doing. Imagine you were running a window washing company and you had to send your workers to various houses across the city to wash their windows. You could just evenly split up the houses and give each worker an equal number of houses to wash. And maybe you would divide those houses by region so the workers wouldn't have to travel far to get from one house to the next house. But even then, one worker might have a lot more work to do than the others. Maybe one area of the city is near a coal plant, so the windows there take much longer to wash than the windows in other parts of the city. So your one worker would finish much later than the other workers. And overall, you wouldn't get a 10 times speed up over the time it would take with just one window washer, because not all 10 window washers that you sent out were working for the whole time. One of them was working much longer than the other. So the whole time that window washer was washing alone, you got no benefit from the other washers you had hired. How could you solve this? One way that might work is to give a smaller number of houses to each window washer and have some left over. Then when each person finished their job, they could look for the list and see what houses were left and take some of those to work on. That way it would be hard for one person to get a much larger chunk of the work than the other window washers. The drawback of this is that you need to have this list, and all the window washers need to be able to see it and coordinate their efforts to make sure that 2 people don't go to the same house. So as you can see, balancing the workloads of your workers is sometimes at odds with limiting the amount of communication and coordination that you have to do. Finally, a third limitation is the fact that some things just can't be done in parallel. Let's say you own a dryer but no washer. So you wash your clothes by hand and then put them in the dryer. If you have multiple people to help you with your laundry, you can wash your clothes faster since everyone can wash things at the same time. But having more people doesn't make the dryer work any faster, so there's a limit how much speed you can get. However, there's still a way you can apply the concept of parallelism here to do more laundry faster, even if you don't have any additional people to help you. These blue blocks represent the washer. These green blocks represent the dryer. Horizontally, this is how much time it takes to run the washer, how much time it takes to run the dryer. If we run the washer, then run the dryer, then washer, then dryer, then washer, then dryer, this will take a while to do 3 loads of laundry, as you can see horizontally. But what if instead we make sure that the dryer is always in use? Since it takes the most time to run, it's going to be the limiting factor here. So while we run the dryer, we also start washing the next load of clothes. If you compare the amount of time it would take doing all of them in order compared to this new parallel solution where we run the washer while we run the dryer, you see that we save a lot of time. And that's an important concept often referred to as pipelining, which is making sure that the biggest bottleneck in your process is always in use, so that it's as little of a limiting factor as possible, and you can be as parallel as possible in your process. The first letter of your confirmation code is Y. Finally, we're going to look at some problems that can arise when people or machines doing a task in parallel need to share some of the same resources. One example of this would be if multiple people are making a sandwich, but there's only one loaf of bread, one container of turkey, one container of cheese. If each person has one of the containers of food, and nobody is willing to give up their container of food until they've made a sandwich, no one's going to be able to make a sandwich because everyone needs a type of food that somebody else has to finish making their sandwich. A more reasonable example would be gridlock traffic. If 4 cars all accidentally pull into an intersection at the same time, each of them will need the road space that the other is occupying, but none of them can back up and give up that space since there are cars behind them. So every car has a resource that one of the other cars needs to proceed, but none of them can give up that resource, so nothing will make any progress. A similar problem is known as live lock. This is like deadlock in that none of the people or processes are moving forward. However, they are all constantly doing work. Like if you had 4 cars at the intersection, they all went in at the same time, then they all backed up to let the other go forward, and then they all moved in at the same time again, and repeated this forever. The cars would keep driving, but none of them are actually making any forward progress. People are constantly doing things, but nothing is ever progressing. So it's as big of a problem as deadlock. A slightly different problem that can arise is starvation. Starvation occurs when people or tasks are constantly making progress, but some people or tasks are locked out of making any progress, possibly forever, because they cannot get access to the shared resources that they need to progress. For example, if the DMV had a policy of process anyone who's taking a driving test first, then anyone who's renewing their ID, and people kept showing up to take driving tests, you would never get to renew your ID, since you would never get access to the resource of the DMV official. This is something to be careful about. When a task or a computer program automatically lets people or machines that have a higher priority by some measure of priority go first, the people or machines that have a lower priority may never get to finish their task, which can definitely cause problems. The second letter of your confirmation code is Y. So in summary, parallelism can allow you to do things much faster than you could do alone or with one machine, but there are some major challenges associated with it. Sometimes it costs too much money to get more people or more machines. Sometimes it's too hard to coordinate multiple people or machines working on the same thing, or it's too hard to balance their workloads so that you actually get a speed up corresponding to the number of people or machines you paid for. Sometimes more people or machines can't even possibly speed up your task. You also have to be careful if the thing you're trying to do in parallel requires people to use shared resources, as deadlock, live lock, and starvation are all big problems that can occur then. Still, the sheer speed parallelism can give you makes it worth trying to solve these challenges and figure out how best to use it, both in computer programming and in everyday life. The third letter of your confirmation code is Z.